cluster strategy. We put this together because, as you know, yesterday we were put into a yellow zone. So we've been working very hard with Erie County Department of Health. We've been working with our local districts. We've all been working together through this process. And we'd like to share some information with you right now about, where we are, and hopefully answer a lot of the questions that you might have at this point in time. And if we can't answer your questions right now, we will get the answers for you because we are working this problem every day. So I asked Christine Harding to help this presentation today. Christine is our nurse practitioner, and she has been working with Erie County Department of Health literally every single day, 7 days a week. And she has an enormous amount of information, and she's really been a great resource to our district as we've been putting our plan together, and as we continue, I know the rest of the week, continuing to put our plan together and everything moving forward to make sure that we are fully prepared to implement yellow zone strategies. So next slide, Nick. So Erie County is put in a yellow zone COVID-19 microcluster. What is the criteria for a yellow zone? Well, I think you heard this too on some of the television stations. It's been pretty much on all the news, but in case you missed some, it's a 7-day rolling average positivity above 2.5% for 10 days, and the geographic area has 10 or more new daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day rolling average. So basically a 7 rolling average of above 2.5%, and you're in a yellow zone. Now we're actually far above that right now. So these are the numbers that I think we're very concerned to our governor, and why we're put in this zone. Our current number today was 5.5% for a 7-day rolling average as of November 10th. Our daily positivity infection rate is 7.1% as of today. So actually, if you look at those numbers, you would say that that's not yellow. As we go forward, you might even say that those are red numbers. Well, we could end up being in a different color if these numbers don't change. If the trajectory continues, we could end up not just being in yellow, but maybe in an orange or red zone. This is an opportunity for the region to get the numbers under control and prepare. That's what our county executive has said in his announcements, that right now that we've all been put in a yellow zone to basically review our practices, look at what we're doing, and start to make changes so that we can change these numbers. And I can tell you that we're doing everything we can. And from talking to all the superintendents in the region, all of the school districts right now are going to be doing everything in their power to take this opportunity to do everything in our power, to get these numbers to be going in a different trajectory. Next slide. So a microcluster strategy, again, for the yellow zone, the 7-day rolling average of positivity, we talked about that. Schools can remain open in a yellow zone. That's one of the things that I want to make clear. We must do random testing of 20% of our in-person students and staff at least once a week. And that was one of the questions that came up. Is it remote and in-person students? And the answer for that question is it's 20% of the in-person students and the teachers and all staff. So it's the entire staff of the school. We established a system in WITS already for randomizing the testing. Some people have asked the question already, how are you going to randomize if it's supposed to be a random 20% who get tested? Well, we've already put together a system. We're using WITS, and what we're going to do is it's purely random. We have it programmed so that different people would randomly come up each time we do it. Consent forms will be sent to the selected. Today, what we did, if you notice, we sent a form out to see about who would, we want to make sure everybody would be willing to put in consent forms, because there is an opportunity, folks, if they don't want to consent to testing, they don't have to. So we tried to get some information out today too about the type of test, and we'll get into that in a few minutes. The test that we'll be using, or what the state has told us they're sending us, is the Binax test, which is not the big intrusive test. It's where they just do a low swab and they put it on a card. but we'll be talking about that as we go on in the presentation. Next slide. And now turn it over to Christine. I'm going to have her talk about the orange and red zones. I know that she was on a special webinar the other day to talk specifically about this. So Christine, I want you to explain to us what would happen if we did an orange zone or red zone.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me join. The orange zone gets a little more complicated once we hit orange or red, should we hit that. And so what it looks at is really a 7-day rolling average positivity above 3% for 10 days, and the geographic area has 10 or more newly daily cases per 100,000 residents on a 7-day rolling average. And what will happen with the orange zone, should that be designated, schools need to temporarily pivot to fully remote instruction for a 2-week period. So that is a mandatory pivot to those 2 weeks. In order for schools to be able to reopen, all students, faculty, staff who would be attending any on-site instruction or teaching would need to have a negative COVID test in order to reopen. From there, once you are reopened and it's starting 7 days after reopening, then there has to be 25% of your in-person population would have to be tested weekly. And again, we would have that system that Dr. McKenna mentioned in WITS to be able to pull our sample from, and the consent forms that Dr. McKenna mentioned. And the other thing that has to occur in this orange zone would be a line list report, it's called, to the DOH, New York State Department of Health, with all of our information on how many people we tested and what those test results are. So in addition to our daily reporting that I think everyone is aware of, that's required for New York State, this would be an additional report and component that's required in the orange zone. Next slide, please. For red zone, pretty much everything stays the same. The difference here is the 7-day rolling average positivity above 4% for 10 days is when you hit that red zone. And again, it would be that temporary pivot to the full remote for the 2 weeks, and the 25% of your in-person students, teachers, staff would need to be tested. So that part stays the same during that red zone. Next slide, please.
Have to unmute there. Now I'd like to talk about some of the communication that we've been having this week and will continue to have. We're going to continue to have conversations with the Erie County Department of Health. We speak to them on a daily basis. We got the guidelines from them as we're putting our plan together. We run basically everything through them to make sure that the things that we're doing meet their guidelines. We have continued to have conversations with medical partners in our community. One of the folks that we're having conversations with is outside testing organizations, because if we're going to be doing testing, you'll see in a few slides, there's a lot of tests that Williamsville would have to do. If our whole district is in a yellow zone, that's almost 800 tests a week, 20% comes out to. So that's a lot of tests. So for us to get the capacity to do that, we need to look outside medical partners. So that's what we've been doing, yesterday and today, is we've been having conversations with outside medical partners to see how we can partner with them to do testing. The Erie County Department of Health was going to, at first was going to help districts with that, but because of the sheer volume now across, Western New York, they no longer have the capacity to be able to really come in and help school districts, because you can tell if just Williamsville alone needs, almost 1,800 tests, probably across our region, there's probably a need for probably over 10,000 tests at this particular time. So the districts in general across the region are grappling with the same problem, and that's the testing capacity. So I know Williamsville, as well as other districts, are in conversations with outside medical partners to see if there's ways that we can partner to get the capacity for testing. We also had conversations with the town of Amherst to look at maybe some facilities outside of our school, perhaps, to if we had to use any testing sites outside of our school. So we've had some conversations there. And continue to have conversations with the area superintendents. The superintendents have basically been talking on a daily basis since probably last Thursday. And we continue to talk on a daily basis to share ideas with each other and help each other out. I can say the whole region really is working together to help to solve this problem. And I say thanks to all my fellow superintendents out there who are working hard and have been so cooperative, and everyone's been sharing just lots of ideas. It's definitely the same problems, issues are in every district. Next slide. Just on the communication we've already sent out. I know we sent a letter out to families and staff on November 6th. Really, that was what last Friday, just to get people accumulate, like to start to get the idea of what the yellow, orange, red zone is all about and the metrics for that. We sent a letter to families and staff on November 9th regarding yellow zone designation. We did that because we've been trying to get information out as we get information. And today we sent the survey to faculty and staff and families for their willingness to participate in the random testing. And you see many of the districts are getting that out as well. That's part of a checklist that we got from Erie County Department of Health, was that they suggest we survey our faculty and staff to see the willingness to participate in the testing. So that's why that survey went out today. Some people were asking about that as well, as why we surveying. It's actually part of a plan that was sent to us and to all the districts around the region. So that's why you'll see many of the districts have started this process of surveying their faculty and staff and families about the willingness to send. Next slide. We also, to help with communication, we created an informational page on the district's website regarding the yellow, orange, and red zone information. So if you have questions, I know Mr. Filipowski is taking all of the most recent correspondences from Erie County Department of Health, New York Department of Health. We're putting them all on our own website. So I would suggest too, with questions that you might have about yellow, orange, and red zone, there's some really good documents there to read through. So I would tell everybody to reach out to that informational page that we now have on our website. And thank you, Nick, for putting that up today so that our parents can use that and access that as a resource. And next page, I'm going to turn it over to Christine now, and she's going to talk a little bit about the zip codes and the actual amount of weekly tests that we would need for each zip code. Christine.
Thanks. So what we did in preparation, we really broke down our buildings, where they reside, what zip codes they reside in, because that is how the testing can occur. We were actually, I think everybody was quite surprised with the governor announcing all of Erie County was in the yellow zone. We kind of anticipated a little more dissection and looking at really zip codes and problematic zip codes. So in preparation, we really took a look at where our buildings reside and try to get a good understanding of what the amount of weekly tests would look like. So in the 14051 zip code, we have Dodge, Casey Transit, and Williamsville East. And really 20%, that would be 533 weekly tests. So that's in that yellow zone. If that hit the orange, red zone, if the zip code should fall into that designation, you're looking at about 667 weekly tests to meet that 25% testing criteria. Next slide, please. 14221 zip code, it has 9 buildings residing in that zip code. So this is going to be obviously an increase, quite an increase in our testing. 20% is 1,204 weekly tests, and 25% would be 1,594 tests should we hit that orange or that red zone criteria. And again, this is really looking at your on-site population. This is not, it does not include the need to test for any remote learner. This is really just our on-site population numbers. And we did all these projections, again, in anticipation for what testing would look like and what kind of capacity we were looking at. So next slide, please. So Dr. McKenna mentioned we are anticipating what will happen. What we're told is happening is that New York State Department of Health will really send these Binax Now tests. It's an antigen test to Erie County Department of Health, and from there it would be distributed to be able to support the needs for the volume of testing that would be required. At this point in time, those tests have not been deployed yet, and there's really no definitive timeline as to when these tests would come. And that's really when we are in that yellow zone, but the clock really starts ticking as soon as those tests arrive in terms of the timeline that we have to conduct the weekly test. So the Binax Now test, we will get more information out. There's some videos just so parents, students, our staff can kind of take a look at what it is, but it's really a non-invasive nasal swab. It's not that nasopharyngeal swab that goes all the way up the nostril. This is really just more of a Q-tip and a localized swab inside the nasal cavity. Results are rapid, 15 minutes, the test will be there. And so it's really, it's called a credit card style test, and it's been compared to something like a home pregnancy test in terms of the results and what it all looks like and how rapid it is. So we will get some video information out there for everyone, just so you can kind of take a closer look, and hopefully an educational pamphlet as well. So there are some testing sites that the district has identified. Maple East, Williamsville North, Williamsville South, that's what we're hoping for and projecting in terms of our sites within the district. And as Dr. McKenna mentioned, you know, we did work with Amherst to also look at potentially, you know, a site within the town as well. So these are different options that we're exploring at this point in time. The other thing I just wanted to point out, all the information that we share, I just think it's really important, especially for the community, to understand that in terms of, although we're seeing an increase in numbers out in the community, and certainly with the daily updates that Dr. McKenna provides with our cases, we are seeing and feeling the effects of the increase in the infection rate in the community. But in terms of schools, we are not seeing that in-school transmission of COVID. And so really what that tells us and the Erie County Department of Health is all of the mitigating practices that are in play for schools to be able to operate, starting with our health screening questionnaire, staying home if you're sick, wearing your face covering, social distancing. All of those mitigating practices are really effective when you aren't seeing that in-school transmission. It's really what's happening outside of the school day that is really impacting numbers and the increase. So I just want to point that out because it's a very important takeaway, is just to really stay focused on the positives with regard to these practices, and that taking something away in terms of these are effective. And I think we just have to really, really stay mindful of that piece. Next slide, please. Turn it back over to Dr. McKenna.
Yeah, I'll just go over a brief summary of just some of the things we're going to continue to work on. Of course, we're going to continue our daily consultation with the Erie County Department of Health. They've been, really great partners through the process. They give us incredibly information to help us with our plan and our strategies, and I thank them. We've had multiple informational meetings with our building principals already. We've told the principals to be ready. If we go to an orange zone or a red zone, one of the questions that's come up too is, what if we have to transition to into red or orange? You can see what Christine has said before. That means that you have to go to remote for at least 2 weeks. Well, with the middle school, high school, we've already got that. We've already been through that. So we can transition pretty easily with the middle schools and high schools. With elementary schools, we did talk with the principals, and I know that they've had conversations with their staff to make sure that their staff is preparing to, just in case there's any time that they have to make a transition. And I know that they've already done that. And I know some of the parents that we spoke to have already mentioned that, their children have brought things home, what I mean, in preparation. And not, we don't know when, if and when, but we'll be prepared. So we've had many conversations with our principals if we have to make transitions to orange or red. And I'm glad to see that they have had the conversations with their staff, and we are pairing as we speak to make any transitions that need to. Informational meetings with the union leaders. I met with the union leaders today of all our 7 bargaining units, because these things impact everybody. So I wanted to, and they gave me some really great feedback today. And in fact, some of the questions that they, gave me today with the leadership team, we're going to be exploring, tomorrow and the next day, because how does these things affect all their membership? Great question. So we're going to have more meetings with the union leaders as we go through. Establish a system of random selection for weekly testing. Yep, we've got that done. That was one of the things on the checklist that they said, make sure you get that done. And again, we're using WITS to make sure that we have a very fair random selection process. We've identified our testing sites. That's one of the things ECDOH told us to do. System for notification, we created that. The system for consent forms, we've created that. Continue to provide updates and information as things become available. You can see we've already sent out, at least 2 informational correspondences to you. And as you get correspondence to us, we will get that out to you. As soon as we get the information, we will get out to you, to the community, as soon as we possibly can. So we literally are on the phone every day with the Department of Health, and we're working with our principals, and we're making sure that we are prepared for whatever step it is that we need to take. Next slide. And this is just a summary. I know that the COVID-19 update to families, we were doing it every day. And if you remember, we were, every time we had a new case, we were sending it out, on text messages. We got the feedback, and we stopped that practice because we started to get too many. So we went to, we're transitioning to a daily COVID-19 health report. So one daily notification, through WITSmail, with a list of positive cases in the district. And of course, it's posted on the report card as well. So we thought that was better, since the cases were, were starting to increase. And we felt that, giving people, texts every so many minutes and things like that was, not the best way to, to inform people. So a daily, one daily notification through WITSmail, we made the transition. Again, we heard the voices of people too. A lot of parents communicated to us and asked if we would please do that. So we listened, and we made sure that we made that adjustment. And but we're dedicated every day to making sure that we get you the information. We communicate with you as soon as we have the information, and every day, as soon as we get the information, we will get it out to you. And we wanted you to see that we have our basic plan in place. All the things that are within our control right now, we've in control, but there's things that are outside of our control, and that really is the capacity to test right now. With having to do at the moment, 1,800 or approximately 1,800 tests in a week, that's a big task. We're working that task. We're going to keep reaching out to our partners, and we're trying to find ways to make that happen. So that's what we're working on right now, and we're going to work tirelessly through this process. So I think that's it for this. So next slide. I think we're done. So I hope that answered a lot of questions that you might have. But of course, we're open to any questions that you might have along the way. And again, if we have the answer, we'll get it to we'll get to you. If we don't have it, we'll find it. And some of the questions right now, there are some things that are in limbo, at the moment. I think one of the big questions that's in limbo is consent. We've heard that today too, about what if people refuse consent. Well, we heard a couple of different things. So we want to make sure we're supposed to be getting guidance on that by the end of the week. I know the county executive today, said that if you refuse consent, that you can't come in school. So, but they're checking on that guidance. I know that the superintendents across the region have asked for clarification. So, and they said they're going to get us clarification. So that's a question that we heard today that's still, there's not a definitive answer at this particular moment, but clarification will be coming soon. And as soon as we get the clarification, we'll make sure that you have the clarification. So again, I hope that our presentation answered a lot of your questions. We're happy to, take your questions and help find answers for them. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. McKenna, and thank you, Ms. Harding, for all that information. There were a number of parents who did submit questions today to our district clerk, who forwarded them to us. A number of them were answered, but there's a couple that I just want to check on. So I understand the test would be a Binax nasal swab, and the results would come in 15 minutes. And you shared the testing locations at the 3 schools. Would this also be a requirement for our pre-K students?
No, Christine, I believe it's not for pre-K students or for students in parochial schools.
So it's if we were to have pre-K within our district buildings, then we would have to test them. But each site that is operating, just like they needed a reopening plan, they would have to come up with a testing plan as well, just like we're having to do within our district for any of the non-public schools.
Right. Yeah, that's a good clarifier.
Yes, thank you. So it's for students who are attending within our schools, but would our private school students have access to come to our 3 sites for testing if they wanted to?
Christine, I'll have you answer that.
Okay, it's my understanding that each building, as part of their plan to not only reopen, how they came up with their own individual plan, but in order to comply with the yellow zone criteria and the red orange zone criteria, because again, it's where that building also resides zip code wise, but they would need their own testing plan with regard to how they would comply, because they would also be responsible for doing the things we would need to do, which is to report out the actual information with respect to our on-site population and test results of our on-site population. So they'd have an obligation to do the same thing and test 20% in the yellow zone of their on-site population that we're having to do in our school buildings as well.
Okay, thank you. And the one part, and I apologize if I missed it, when would this testing start?
Well, I think that's the question. I know that we were asking as superintendents, and I know that in the other parts of the state where that happened, it took some time to get the tests from the state to the districts. So I guess the testing would start once the tests were able to be delivered to the districts. Now, from what I understand in the other parts of the state, when that happened, that took over a week to get there. So when we would get those tests, not exactly sure. But once the Erie County Department of Health received them from the state, and then we're able to distribute them to us, that's when we would start. So my guess is we have a little bit of time if it goes what the other, I think, what did they say? In the last, we actually had a specific with one of the districts. They were identified on October 9th and they got the tests on October 26th. I can't remember the district that they said that there was, but I know when we researched.
Endicott.
Yeah. So we know that in that district, it took that long to get the tests. I don't know if it'll take that long for us because we asked that specific question, and the answer that we got is once the tests arrive, that's when we have to start giving them. So whether it would take that 1 or 2 weeks, we're not sure.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm going to let the rest of the board ask questions. I just want to make a quick comment and say that, first of all, I appreciate the frequency of the communication. I know for some it was a little bit redundant the other day when my phone was going off every couple of minutes with a new case. So I appreciate the move to have a daily report. I do think that that's important. And all of the information that is being communicated both on the district website, in tonight's presentation, and through the correspondence that you and I have had, Dr. McKenna, it's been very helpful. I'll make sure that all of the questions that parents are submitting, they're coming through to our district clerk. I'll make sure that they go to Mr. Filipowski so they can perhaps become part of a question and answer document that we can get added to our site. A number of those questions were answered in the presentation tonight, and the ones that seem to be outstanding are ones that I know you're continuing to follow up on. So for me as a parent, that gives me an extreme amount of confidence. I have one in college, and her school is going remote beginning tomorrow. She's a CA, so she has to stay on campus as an essential personnel. But it's stressful as a parent. So having the communication and knowing that the collaboration is taking place with you and with our representatives at the Department of Health, with Dr. Burstein and Christine, all the work that you're doing, because I know you and I have been speaking on the phone regularly as well. It's all very comforting to me as a parent and as a board member to bring a little bit of stability around an uncertain time. So thank you very much for all the work that's happening. And with that, I'll take any questions from the board. Mr. Bornstein.
Thank you, Mrs. Leatherbarrow, and thank you, team. The communication has been excellent, and I'm grateful for that. I wonder if we can just drill down briefly on those 29 cases in our district. I already know from the communication that many or maybe all of them were not in school related. They were just people connected to our school district. Could you just talk briefly about the protocols involved once a case has been identified, how we address that?
I'll turn that over to Christine again, because I know she deals with that every day, multiple times. I could give you my answer, but I know hers would be much more detailed than I would give.
Thanks, Dr. McKenna. So yeah, to just kind of reiterate a really important point that I think, the board and the community really needs to hear is that there really is not that in-school transmission. And what that means is there hasn't been teacher to teacher, student to student, student to teacher, teacher to student, anything like that. That is not occurring. So really what that says is that, and what we know is that the cases that we are dealing with is really from what's happening outside of the school setting, because we're not seeing that in school transmission because of these mitigating practices are really effective, and they're the strategies that we know are evidence-based for the most part and working. So that's an important takeaway. In terms of when there is a case, and Dr. McKenna said it, we are really dealing with the health department at all hours, weekends, and we will learn of a case one of two ways: from the individual themselves or a family member that reports the positive, or directly from Erie County, and nothing gets officially reported until we have a confirmation of a true positive result through Erie County. So we will confirm every positive. From there, we really collaborate with the family, with the health department, to figure out anybody that is a close contact to that individual. And then they look to, the Erie County Department of Health looks to contact those individuals that have been deemed a close contact, and they will go over the quarantine requirements for that individual, which is a 14-day quarantine from their last date of exposure. And then they generally will recommend, they don't require, but they recommend, and every family, every person who is identified as a close contact will do different things with this information, but they will recommend testing 5 days or more from that individual's last exposure to the positive individual. So if you go for testing too soon, you could potentially miss a positive. So they do recommend waiting that 5 days or more. There is rapid testing for Erie County residents that are students or staff in the building that are symptomatic only. So for symptomatic individuals that are looking to know their status, can they return to school? Can they return to work? What is their status for those symptomatic individuals who are not under a quarantine order, meaning they weren't identified as a close contact? They do qualify for rapid testing through Erie County, and we also will link families or individuals to that number so that they can set up testing, so that we can stay operational to make sure our staff is not only healthy that are returning into the building, but get them back as soon as possible, as well as our students. So that is really a nice resource if it's utilized properly, the rapid testing.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you. Mrs. Van Sice?
Yeah, so thank you very much. That presentation was excellent. It answered a lot of questions, helped to lessen anxiety, and I know you've been working tirelessly, everyone. I do have two questions, though, regarding capacity and funding. So we are currently waiting for the state to deliver the tests, which is frightening to me, because we are talking a mass production of a product that we are only one district, a large district, and everybody else is going to be waiting too. So based on that, I'll be honest, it worries me of when we get the tests and how many tests would we actually get. So are we as a district allowed? I know that Dr. McKenna and I spoke last night, and I also consulted with some medical professionals, and a suggestion was made about pooled sample testing. There's much research on that. Currently, Buff State is doing it. It's just a way to test individuals in large groups with this pooled sample testing. Are we as a district, if the state does not come through with testing, but still requires us to test, are we allowed and permitted to go with an outside group or agency that can provide tests?
Yeah, my understanding is yes, and that's one of the things that we're looking into is outside providers to see. That was earlier in the presentation when I said, we're researching that as we speak. So we were on the phone today with people, outside providers. We'll continue, discussions even tomorrow with some of our outside providers. And I know Thursday we even have an appointment with some folks that we're supposed to be talking regarding the situation as well. I know one of the situations we're researching too, and Kristen, you can talk a little bit about, is we may have to become an LSL. So I think we're going to start the application process so that we can become a site, but we have to be careful with that because we have to look with our insurance company whether they're going to cover it. Now, here's the thing. If we did the testing ourselves, insurance said they wouldn't cover it. But if we partner with another agency, then they would be willing to cover it. So that's why we're exploring these options right now as we speak. And I think, Christine, you reached out about the application for an SL today, and maybe you can talk a little bit about that because I think real possibility here.
Yeah, I think there's just a couple important things to really note is that our understanding too from Erie County is if New York State is not supplying the tests, the clock, even though we're in this yellow zone, the clock doesn't start ticking until those tests are really in hand. So they're going to go to Erie County, then disperse from there. So really, until those tests are here, the clock hasn't officially started, despite that yellow zone designation. And again, looking at different zip codes and how the zones were supposed to work, because really the governor can do what he wants. He can designate street lines, he can do zip codes, it can be by building. So really, we anticipate too to hear some additional information next week is our understanding too with regard to more about the zones. And we know, again, all of Erie County is yellow, but are they going to do any more designations next week, just really honing in on different zip codes and different hotspots, because that was the original intent of this micro cluster. So yeah, we're exploring every option, really looking to partner, as Dr. McKenna mentioned, to really have that manpower, that capacity to test. We're open to a lot of different options. Things, as we know with COVID, change minute by minute sometimes. So really, Erie County is waiting on some additional guidelines from the state, as are we. But we continue to explore different options. John mentioned the limited lab, the LSL, and we are looking at that application to really, those sites that we kind of mentioned, to really see if that is how long that will take. Is that something that we do need to pursue, no matter who's doing the testing, if it's someone that we are partnering with, and what exactly that means. So we have that application, and we're in the process of looking into that option, as we are many different options.
Great,
And
thank you.
As we look into these options too, that's why we want to make sure they're in consultation also with NYSER, our insurance carrier, and we want to get things vetted through legal. We want to make sure that whatever decisions that we do make sense from our insurance perspective and from a legal perspective. So these are the things that we're working on these this afternoon, and we're going to continue working the problem until we get the solution.
Great, thank you. So I just wanted to ask about the funding. If the state is providing the tests, will they be basically footing the bill? Is there going to be an additional charge to us? Or if we need to go with an outside agency, does the burden fall on the district? Would there be aid provided? What does the funding look like for this?
I'll turn it over to Mr. Mirsky for this. I know that we did get some funding, Tom, and I'll let you talk about that. But I know we'll have to incur costs, I'm sure, with going with an outside agency. But Tom, I'll let you talk about the funding.
Sure. We have three options. The first option, which is the least option we want to access, is our general fund. And that would be out of our 2020-21 budget. But we have two other options that I think may become available. One is CARES Act funding. We have not used all the CARES Act dollars that have been allocated us, especially the ones we received from Erie County. So what we would be responsible for from our initial discussions, as Dr. McKenna and Christine mentioned, would be some type of hourly rate for any outside firm, but the tests themselves and everything, it's our understanding, are covered by the county, so there's no expense there. So I do believe that CARES Act funding would pick up those costs. The third option would be FEMA. We've filed 2 FEMA claims to date. We've received almost $200,000 from FEMA. And so I will be looking, we have a FEMA meeting every week. And so this coming week, I'm going to propose to see whether they would actually cover the costs for the payment to an outside firm for their support of professional support.
Thank you so much. That is awesome. I appreciate it.
Mary, do you want to go? Oh,
Thank you. Again, thanks for the presentation. One of the pieces that I really appreciate is seeing how much work you are putting into trying to make this work. I'm glad that we have this option for our remote families to continue their education, but we do have a high percentage of families that are appreciating and enjoying our high flex model for those kids that are coming to school. So I really appreciate the work that's being done to try to keep this model in play where we have both of these options in person or at home. My question is about the survey that came home today. When parents are considering whether or not they feel comfortable having their child tested, I'm thinking about the information you shared, how many students would need to be tested per week. And it looks like we've identified some testing sites. I know that we're still in the planning stages. My question is there a deadline as far as when kids get tested? So the guidance at this point in time seems to be per week. Does that mean that these students that are randomly selected have to do this on Monday morning and wait until their test comes? Is it something where families have to consider their child being around others, or do you know if it's something that they could, as long as it gets done throughout the week? I'm just trying to wrap my head around the logistics of it, and as a parent, what that would look like for children.
There's the discussions we had today. What we'd like to do is really get a schedule. and have the students schedule their tests. And we would hope that they could schedule it at times that work best for, for them and their families. That was my understanding today. I know, Tom, you were part of those conversations today too. I believe that was, we're going to try to work around. So example, if you're a Monday and Tuesday, a cohort A student, we probably try to schedule you on Thursday and Friday and vice versa. And so we looked at trying to find schedules, and the companies that we were talking today, I think that's what we decided, that if we go in those directions, we would make schedules and try to fit them the best we could around the existing schedules to try not to disrupt school or as little as possible. Is that your understanding, Tom?
Yeah, that's right, Dr. McKenna. We, first thing is, I don't think we've got clarification from Erie County Department of Health yet on when the testing results are due into them. But we're going under the assumption that we have basically a full week to do the testing. And our initial conversations were to provide 5 days and possibly even a Saturday for testing purposes with some late nights. So it's flex hours. That was something that we wanted to make sure we provided as much options to our families as possible, as well as to our staff, because we have staff, as you know, that are on second shift. So we have to accommodate everybody.
Excellent. That's really good to hear. Thank you. And it sounds like I just want to clarify from what you said before that assuming we have a plan in place, that we don't have to pause anything or we're not forced to go remote until we start testing, that we can continue as normal until these tests arrive. Is that accurate?
That's my understanding.
Great. Well, given the fact that we're not seeing school transmission to be an issue from what Christine Harding shared with us, I think that that's excellent that we're exploring all of these options and allowing our high flex model that we saw seems to be working very well to continue. So thank you very much for all your work on this, for the constant communication, and I appreciate the updates that are coming daily, regularly to families. Thank you for continuing that communication with us all.
Thank you. Mike?
Mr. Biscaglia has his hand up.
Yeah, actually, Ms. Van Cise and Ms. Beeger answered or asked two of the questions I was going to ask, so that's great. I did want to at least say that I'm happy to hear that we're attempting to continue school even in a yellow zone, considering other districts have thought of doing different things, because I think it's very imperative that we keep our students in school as long as possible. That's an important thing, I know to our community and myself. So I'm very happy to hear that you guys are working so hard and diligently to accomplish that. I know this isn't easy. I also like to hear that Dr. McKenna has been working with other superintendents and in communication, which really helps the entire community of Erie County, not just our school district. So I'm happy to hear that. Kind of just a question on top of with the consent, if I heard right with my notes. So we don't know yet if a child does not want to consent, if they're not allowed to come into school then? Is that still kind of out there? So if,
I get what I heard today, and that is, from the county's perspective, the county executive today said that if people refuse, students and staff, that they would have to be held out of school. But I know that, so that was what was said today. But I know that the superintendents, wanted clarification on that because we couldn't find anything in writing. I know that the county executive said that, and not that we don't believe him, but I know that when we looked at parts of the state that are in the yellow zone right now, that was not a requirement for other parts of the state. So we wanted to make sure we have absolute clarification, because that's a big one. That's a big thing. So we want to make sure that we have it absolutely correct when we, publish something in doubt. So it's definitely worth waiting a couple of days to make sure we get proper clarification on that. And so that's where we are. I know that we just want to make sure that, and we're supposed to be getting additional guidance that's supposed to be coming out, by the end of the week. So we're hoping that that'll be part of a stronger clarification piece in writing because right now we haven't seen anything in writing. You know what I mean? That absolutely positively clarifies it. So, and since there's some different things that have happened in different parts of the state, we just want to make sure that whatever we do, it's what we're supposed to do. And it could be that Erie County is just different than another county. I mean, you know, the Erie County Department of Health is, you know, they basically, we have to go by their guidance. So right now, still waiting for additional guidance with that particular question.
Okay, no, that's fine. And as soon as you know, if you could, you know, let us know and the public know, I think that's important considering, you know, it's hard to fathom, you know, a kindergartner having to do it, which, you know, it's just the life we're living right now, though. I know that is not our doing. It's, you know, we have to follow the quarantine rules and somewhat, but if, you know, as soon as we find out that answer, if we can let everyone know, that would be very much appreciated. And then just in terms of the testing sites, you did mention, which I was glad to hear, trying to, you know, not disturb in school learning at times, whether it's cohort A, maybe doing testing on Thursdays and Fridays. If a random student is picked that is in elementary school, will there be times designated, or has there been thought or planned times designated for after school where parents are working, where they're able to bring a student to that testing area? I'm sure this has been thought of, but it's just questions I had to make sure we're, you know, thinking of every aspect that goes into this.
Yeah, I think as Tom was saying, that we're looking at flexible hours and, you know, after school hours and on weekends, correct, Tom?
That's correct, John. We're going to try and have some later hours in the evening. And we'll be working out the specifics as we go a little bit further in our discussions with the vendor.
I appreciate it. That sounds great. I'm glad you guys are working to that, because that helps families. And I think that'll put a little bit of ease into all of us, knowing that it won't disturb another aspect of someone's day or life, because, you know, it's tough right now. But again, I really appreciate you guys working so hard and diligently to make sure our kids are staying in school at this time, even though we've gone into yellow, you know, and hopefully we can get it down where it's not in orange or red. But I appreciate everything, and thank you for the answers to my questions.
Thank you, Mike. Crystal.
Ms. Casper.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for the presentation and the information that you've given so far. I just wanted clarification on one point in terms of the 20% random sample testing. Is that per school building, that 20% of each building needs to be tested per week for those that are in person?
Yes, that's my understanding, and validate that with Christine. And we've broken down all the buildings too. So if it ever came down to like the real micro clusters, that we have every school broken down by their 20 and 25% of each. So right now the yellow is throughout the whole district, but it could be that it really becomes a micro cluster and could only be one building or two buildings. So we did take the time to make sure that we broke down each building to make sure we had the 20% each building, because I believe that that's we have to break it down per building. Correct, Christine?
Yep, that's correct. So you're looking at 20% of your on-site population for each school building. So we broke it down like that, and then we broke it down into zip codes as well. And then obviously did the entire district